holy shit, we need to get this guy off the internet. Like, we need to just take it all down.
It's like evil runs through all of us, and I don't know. It's just like, to me, that sums up the whole, because I'm not over here trying to pretend I'm a saint.
Taking it free down. There you go. You earned it. And that's a rare spot to be in. Of course, I've committed horrible acts, but you didn't even have to do anything bad when you're here.
He's constantly watching Anthony and just grabbing every little bit of information that he thinks could be helpful to take him down.
And I remember one time, I had this kind of like I've talked about it a little bit before. So my dark days, I felt this voice, and it was like, if nothing else has been working for you, you should kind of like decide, maybe you need to come work on my side. It's a long story, but in a nutshell, there was a voice that was like, you should leave the light, come work for the other side. And I remember falling on the floor and in tears being like, I will never work for the dark. Like, I don't care if I'm in a wheelchair or a bed bound or die, I will never switch sides. And I'm telling you, that moment, something lifted off my chest, like, and then I knew, I was like, you demon, whatever is in my body.
I don't know what Megan's told you, but it will be interesting to see what the response is when this comes out.
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen?
I think there will be a parting of the Red Seas initially, and I think that it will definitely ruffle some feathers, and I think that there will be a large community of people who share it. It's coming out in Vanity Fair, so it will be widely shared.
Yeah,
no matter what.
Amber and Anthony have no idea what's in store for them in the coming years.
Years ago, a group of people secretly teamed up and did everything they could to try to knock me out of the health space. They formed a multi-step, long-term plan to create a, quote, post-medical medium era by feeding false information to mainstream media companies anonymously, like they did to Vanity Fair last year, using a false story about a woman named Stephanie who passed away from cancer years ago. This group thought they could destroy my reputation with a series of hit piece articles against me without anybody knowing who was behind it all, so that they couldn't be held accountable until they reached their goal. They ultimately wanted the hit pieces to lead to securing themselves a deal for an anti-medical medium documentary on Netflix, and would then bring fame and other benefits to them. This group had been working on their plan for a long time, secretly recruiting more people to join them along the way using false information and false stories about me. But their plan was thwarted last year when this group tried to recruit a woman named Amber Visicaro, an alternative medicine practitioner who's been a part of the medical medium community for over 7 years. Amber decided to legally record her phone calls with the leaders of this group for her own protection and safety because she immediately felt that something was off. She ended up capturing evidence of the identities of the main individuals behind this sinister plot, and sadly, all of them, no exaggeration, are people who have been helped by medical medium information, and even some by me personally in their darkest hours, whether it was with their health or their career or both. Amber captured evidence of this massive betrayal, proof that this group is rife with ulterior motives and has been led by individuals with platforms in the health industry who want to take me out, and a documented record of the verifiably false stories and flat-out lies they've been telling people about me to try to get them on their side. Her recordings serve as a record of the entire recruitment process and the recruitment tactics. For example, they tried to sell Amber on the idea that she could be made famous by Vanity Fair if she turned against me and let the journalists position her as the leader of the post-medical medium era.
Amber, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, you definitely have an opportunity to be a leader in what I would call the post-medical medium era. And somehow having him put you on a platform and be like a leader of this era, could be good for you.
Amber knew that what was happening was very wrong, and instead of joining them, she came on 4 episodes of the Medical Medium podcast last year and used her recordings, facts, and evidence to expose this group. The details of their multi-step plot, their malevolent and ulterior motives, and the verifiably false information they'd been trying to spread and publish in order to take Medical Medium and the community down. What we covered was appalling and shocked so many of you to the core. And yet, there is so much more to the story. This is truly one of the biggest scandals that has ever happened in the health industry. As you'll see, it's also one of the biggest instances of capturing corruption within the mainstream media. This episode is the first in what's going to be a full-blown expose. Amber Vizzacaro is back on here with me today, and she's going to be joining me in an ongoing series of many podcast episodes in which we're going to be thoroughly exposing this group that we refer to as the plotters and dismantling their web of lies, ulterior motives, and much more. Some of the evidence we're presenting in these episodes includes original written content, such as text messages and social media posts that have been produced by the plotters and will be reenacted for greater ease in following along. Those who are listening to the podcast can find video versions of these episodes on the Medical Medium YouTube and Rumble channels that will be displaying screenshots, photos, videos, and more. Amber, thank you for being here again. Can you start by explaining why we're back here doing this again?
Thanks, Anthony. It's crazy that it's been over a year since we released the first round of podcast episodes about this group. And part of me is pained by the fact that we're back here addressing this again, because I know that what we all want more than anything is to be able to move on from this deranged plot and all of this group's just really dark and nasty attacks. But we're back here again because even after being exposed and proven wrong last year, the plotters did not stop plotting. In fact, they escalated their behavior significantly to the point that it's become all-out expressions of senseless hatred. They took to social media and put their true intentions on display as they began terrorizing, publicly attacking, bullying, harassing, shaming, and humiliating chronically ill people in the medical medium community who are just minding their own business, trying to heal. This hateful group has disturbingly targeted and attacked moms and even children. If someone in the community tried to defend themselves against these attacks, the plotters would gaslight them, flip it around, portray themselves to be the victims, and label medical medium community members as being bullies when the plotters were in fact the aggressors. Throughout the past year, this organized, hateful group has issued threats toward Anthony and myself. They've repeatedly expressed clear intent to harm medical medium and the community. They've deliberately tried to stop Anthony from doing a free event to support and raise money for the community. They've posted videos of themselves burning medical medium books, and they've incited for others to do the same.
Okay, all these medical medium books are going to be burned today. It's happening. This is going in first celery juice 1. I took out the insides because it's going to take forever to burn.
This is not a joke. This organized, hateful group has even gone as far as to issue a public statement calling for Anthony himself to be exterminated by fire. If you're watching the video version of this episode, you'll see a social media graphic titled Pest Control Cheat Sheet that has a list of options that you can use to repel or kill pests like ants and spiders. You'll see that someone who has been involved with the plotters reshared it and added medical medium fire. You don't have to like Anthony. You don't have to like medical medium information. Medical medium information has always gotten plenty of criticism because anything leading edge always does, and there's a lot of spiritual discrimination out there. This is different. This is just objectively wrong and unacceptable behavior. This is a barrage of baseless attacks that are completely devoid of rationality, truth, and sanity. The plotters have spent the entire past year still desperately trying to create something that doesn't exist. They have pivoted so many times, shifting narratives and saying anything to get a rise out of people. And they've manufactured and spread an unimaginable number of new lies. They are still out there trying to get attention from media companies by playing dirty with lies and verifiably false information, which is going to be thoroughly exposed in this series. They continue to use and exploit deceased individuals and others in the process of trying to get what they want. They continue to ignore reality. They thought that they had a meal ticket because they had text messages from Anthony that they took from a deceased person's phone and manipulated to try to frame a public figure to serve their own agenda. But it's too bad for them that we have all of the texts and other evidence they're hiding that proves them wrong, and their admissions on recording and more, and we will use it all to set the record straight as many times as we need to. And because their attempt to take Anthony out using their false Stephanie story was a failure and didn't get them where they wanted to be, they've had to pivot and manufacture entirely new, outrageously false narratives. That is why we're back here doing this again. But it's all coming out this time around. As you said, Anthony, there is so much more to this story. In our previous episodes, we held back on a lot out of respect for Stephanie and the family. We only released what was necessary to address the false accusations at the time. We also held back on a lot about the plotters, purely as courtesy to them, in hopes that after being proven wrong, they would at the very least just stop. That is very much not what has happened. This organized, hateful group is still trying to rewrite history. They are spreading verifiably false information. They are flat out lying, and they are withholding and altering evidence as they try to perpetuate their false narratives. So that courtesy is no longer going to be extended. At the time of my calls with the plotters, I knew enough to know that what they were telling me was wrong. But I have now spent the entire past year of my life thoroughly studying every detail for myself, every text thread, every communication with every one of the many individuals who were involved, every audio, every photo, every video, every social media post, every piece of data that was submitted to us, everything. Organizing it all into timelines, forensically analyzing it, scrutinizing the facts, and running it all through fact checkers and a legal team. This group is in for a rude awakening. We're going to be exposing everything. There's a lot that's coming in these episodes, and we want to prepare everyone for it by first issuing a trigger warning.
We understand that content about the activities of this organized, hateful group can be triggering for those who have experienced serious betrayal, bullying, harassment, emotional trauma, manipulation, and abuse. So please take care of yourself as you listen. You might want to have some lemon balm tea or a medical medium adrenal healing snack with you.
Next, to further prepare everyone listening for what's to come, I'm going to provide some shocking updates of occurrences since our last series of podcast episodes about this group, as well as some important context as to how we got here today. And I'm going to start by officially releasing the names of the plotters for the first time right now. At this point, everyone deserves to know exactly who and what they're really dealing with. The number one person responsible for this plot, a mountain of lies upon lies, and all of the chronically ill people who have been harmed by all of it, is a woman named Ashley Foster. Ashley Foster is the one you heard telling the original, verifiably false story about Stephanie. Ashley is the one you heard talking about how she was hoping that a director or a producer that her husband works with would be interested in doing a negative documentary about Anthony. And she's the one you heard saying that because Anthony has such a presence, that a Netflix documentary is her goal because then there would be no coming back from that for him.
Yeah, we're hopeful that once the article's out, one of the directors or producers that Britton works with will, become interested in telling the story really well. I think it's going to take that because Anthony is so, he has such a presence. Mm-hmm. And if it just stops at the article, I'm guessing that there would be some buzz in the medical medium community for a few months, but really, I think then it would kind of die down. But ultimately, the way to really get the word out is would be a Netflix documentary, So once you hit that level of like being exposed, there's no coming back from that.
Ashley is the ringleader of this organized, hateful group. Ashley's original false story about Stephanie is the story that was given to Vanity Fair, as was reflected in the questions that were asked of Anthony. The questions literally mirrored Ashley's very distinct false story, and we are going to be reading those questions off in this series. Ashley's story was first posted on social media in 2020. Ashley told more than 15 verifiable falsities. In the comment section of that post, Ashley told more than 15 additional verifiable falsities. The next day, Ashley posted an adapted story to her blog at the time, and that version contained more than 20 verifiable falsities. Ashley was sent a legal letter informing her of the facts and what she was wrong about. Ashley was asked to preserve a record of what she had posted, but instead, Ashley decided to delete all of it immediately. Ashley then spent years plotting and scheming, lying to people around her, trying to get them on her side and against Anthony. In 2022, Ashley tried to get away with taking that same false story about Stephanie from 2020 to the media so that she could hide behind anonymity as a source and therefore not be held accountable for being wrong. Too bad for her, I captured her and her hateful group exposing themselves on recording last year. Since the article and our podcast came out last year, Ashley has spearheaded a whole ongoing smear campaign against Anthony and medical medium information. In addition to all of the attacks, the new lies Ashley's been spreading, all of the pivoting she's done, and the bullying, Ashley has also been childishly accosting people in the medical medium community via DM, intentionally trying to break them down and convince them to stop applying medical medium information.
Hey, I just wanted to slide into your DMs as a little troublemaker.
After having spent years littering lies and false information about Stephanie everywhere, every chance she could get, and claiming Stephanie to be the reason why she started attacking Anthony in the first place, Ashley's now very recently pivoted almost entirely away from Stephanie and has conjured up new narratives about medical medium information in general that are even more verifiably wrong than her fake story about Stephanie. Throughout this series, we will be exposing a tremendous amount of information about Ashley. You're going to learn all about Ashley's true motives behind her desperate desire to want to take Anthony down, and the true history that she's been hiding from everyone all this time. The pathological lies Ashley has told, all while she's claimed to be perfectly honest and morally superior, are going to be put on display. The fabricated stories she's been telling for years are going to unravel. You'll learn about individuals who have been personally victimized, attacked, and bullied by Ashley. Ashley's clearly documented track record of being dishonest and highly inaccurate, and then simply pivoting to the next false claim when caught, that has been playing out for years, is going to be uncovered. You're going to learn just how far Ashley has gone with her lies, what she had to do to get Vanity Fair to run with and publish their hit piece on Anthony, and much more. The number 2 person responsible for this plot and all of the chronically ill people who have been harmed by it, as many of you have figured out, is Robbie Barbero. Robbie has a health business. He was Anthony's friend. Anthony helped him a lot with his career, and Robbie was also my friend. Robbie stabbed us both in the back. Robbie lied to my face while he was secretly plotting to destroy medical medium in the community for over a year during our friendship, all while he was actively using medical medium protocols like the heavy metal detox, celery juice, and specific medical medium recommended supplements himself, and even asking me repeatedly for health advice when he was very clear on the fact that it was medical medium information.
So here he is, plotting to take down the medical medium community while he's using the medical medium heavy metal detox, celery juice, and supplement protocol information to achieve better health for himself. Then asking Amber for help while lying to her. And this is one of Ashley's closest friends. And Ashley said on a recording that she believes there's like no one more trustworthy than Robbie.
But there's like no one more trustworthy than Robbie. So I know that whatever he shared with you is like spot on.
Amazing. Prime example of who the plotters are.
Robbie is the one you heard detailing the plot and multi-step plan using the infamous phrase post-medical medium era, stating that the plotter's vision is to create a negative documentary about Anthony that would be a, quote, fucking hit on Netflix, describing how he had to give the journalist the plotter sought out a lot of direction for the hit piece, how he had to hammer their narrative into the journalist's head, how he had to point the journalist here and point him there, and how he ultimately had to threaten the journalist to get him to move forward with the article.
I connected with a lot of people too. He really appreciated Ash and I, and then just gave him a lot of direction for this piece. We gave him a lot of clarity. So did Taylor. Like, he was having a hard time wrapping his head around a lot of it. And he had to like really hammer it in his head, like what's going on, and like explain the details and point him towards this, point him towards that. But I was upset, and I said, Dan, like, you are scared. You're scared. Like, what's going on? What's the delay? Like, you have everything. It's on the fucking phone. You have all this stuff. Like, what more do you need? Mm-hmm. And then I basically threatened him.
There is a whole lot more to the story with Robbie as well that, again, I held back on because I was really trying to avoid having to fully go there with all of this publicly. I only shared what was necessary at the time. But because Robbie instigated and enabled Ashley to get to where she is now that she uses her platform to relentlessly inflict harm upon the chronically ill, because Ashley won't stop even after being caught lying and proven wrong with facts and evidence, because Ashley has lied and lied and lied and lied some more, and even gone as far as to portray Robbie as somehow being a victim in this situation when that could not be any further from reality. It has become necessary for me to fully set the record straight on Robbie, and I'm not holding back on anything in this series. As you'll see and hear, Robbie could not find a fact about what happened with Stephanie to save his life. Robbie has exhibited zero regard for the actual truth in this matter. Robbie simply used and exploited Stephanie, just like the rest of this group. Robbie went to great lengths to try to take Anthony down for ulterior reasons, which are going to be exposed for the first time. And you're going to get to learn more about who Robbie really is behind the facade he portrays, including his documented track record of disrespecting women and just being a shady person in general. Robbie has deeply hurt, betrayed, and inflicted harm upon me, as well as Anthony and this community, and it's time for him to be held accountable. Another person who I am extremely disappointed to announce as having been involved with this plot is Christina Carrillo Bucaram. Raw Christina with a K from Hawaii. She, just like Robbie, has a competitive health business, which can lend to ulterior motives. Christina is the one you heard calling people in the medical medium community vampires and spreading insane false rumors that she admittedly didn't have accurate information on and couldn't have cared any less but to spread them anyway.
Anthony. That's not even his real name, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew that.
It's not?
It's not. No, it's not.
What is it?
I don't even know. I don't care anymore. That's not his real name, though.
Christina is also the one who said that she believed there would be a parting of the Red Seas after the hit piece that was fed by the plotters about Anthony to Vanity Fair came out.
I don't know what Megan's told you, but it will be interesting to see what the response is when this comes out. You know?
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen?
I think there will be a parting of the Red Seas initially, and I think that it will definitely ruffle some feathers, and I think that there will be a large community of people who share it. I mean, it's coming out in Vanity Fair, so it will be widely shared.
Yeah,
no matter what.
Christina spent the entirety of my call with her gossiping about Anthony and sharing a bunch of absurd rumors about him with me. She admitted that she'd engaged in name-calling and spreading rumors about Anthony around the island that she lives on. Christina only said a little bit about Stephanie, and yet every single thing she told me about Stephanie is provably wrong. Let's just say a lot more is going to be revealed in these episodes. It was very disconcerting for me as I studied the recording of this call and compared it with all of the records of what actually happened with Stephanie in 2017 to learn that Christina had absolutely no clue what happened, just like the rest of these people. But that didn't stop Christina from just saying whatever terrible thing she felt like saying about Anthony. That didn't stop her from spreading rumors or from wanting to see him smeared in the media. There are other individuals with health businesses who are behind this plot to take Anthony out, including a woman named Taylor Call. Taylor is the one you heard in the previous episodes referring to herself and the other members of this hateful group as an elite category of people.
But I'm letting you know, like, we're an elite group of people. We're in an elite category, you know?
Taylor is also the one who you heard saying that she had to commit horrible acts to get into the inner circle of their group.
So, well, you're now part of it, Amber. You're in the inner circle. And, you know, you have to earn your right to get in that circle. So there you go. You've earned it. And then that's a rare spot to be in. Of course, I've committed horrible acts, but, you know, you didn't even have to do anything bad and you're here.
That recording gives me PTSD every time I hear it. Taylor was Stephanie's caretaker that independently took charge of many of Stephanie's medical decisions when Stephanie was sick. Taylor had significant influence over Stephanie's care, for example, when Stephanie would get medical testing or not. Interestingly, Taylor has been entirely hidden and omitted from the stories that are told by Ashley, Stephanie's brother, and the other plotters about Stephanie. Taylor was also entirely hidden and omitted from the Vanity Fair article, even though she was a source that the journalist spoke to. But now, in this series, you will get to hear the truth, the facts, and the evidence of Taylor's role in what was happening with Stephanie that alone makes the narrative the plotters tried to run with impossible. When Taylor tried to tell me what happened with Stephanie from her perspective, not only have I now studied all of the evidence that proves her wrong, which is going to be exposed in this series, but the number of times Taylor said to me on recording in regards to the facts of the story, I don't know, it's all a blur, I can't remember, or it doesn't matter, is appalling. I had multiple calls with Robbie and Taylor individually and together, and what you're about to hear is just a few examples from just one of those calls when Taylor was explaining her version of the Stephanie story to me and Robbie was chiming in.
She'd come for some kind of program that I can't remember. As I told you, I was looking, or maybe I didn't tell you this. I can't remember somehow. I can't remember how. And so he called Stephanie and asked her if she would handle all that. Or maybe Anthony's wife did. I can't remember. There was something, a disc. I can't remember exactly what he said, but the bottom line was he told her she needed to lay flat and not move. So somehow I managed, which I can't remember how, I had to get a nurse there to give her blood test. And the blood didn't show up. I can't remember, but there was things that were off. And maybe it was the liver enzymes and, you know, I don't know, but I don't remember. It's all blur. So, and a lot of it is a blur for me.
And I don't remember exactly what she wrote, but at some point, you know, I was in touch with him directly, and I don't know the timeline. Like, again, I don't know the timeline. This is all just a blur to me. I forget what the fuck it was. It doesn't even matter.
All right, well, whatever. But, you know, whatever.
Fine, whatever. She had the lump. Okay.
You know, these things escape me sometimes. Well, I don't know, it escapes me at the moment. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to tell you that just completely escapes me. Is it a week? I can't remember.
When you take a story to a mainstream media company about somebody who died with the expressed intent of causing harm to somebody else's reputation, it's all a blur. I don't know the timeline. These things escape me sometimes. It doesn't matter, is all completely and entirely unacceptable. On calls that I had with Robbie and Taylor together, they were even arguing with each other about critical details that they couldn't even keep straight and that neither one of them ended up being accurate about.
Also, pause real quick, that prior to all this, there was also, because now where her health was, what happened in this last month, was developing for years, okay? And there was a time when she was in LA, and you can hear this from Ash when you talk to Ash, Amber, and hopefully you do. Her nipples were bleeding.
No, her nipples didn't start bleeding until she had a lump, and she asked Anthony about the lump, and he said it was okay.
Yeah, but this was long before.
Long before.
Exactly.
But they didn't start bleeding until she was in Pennsylvania, until she was...
I don't know. Ask. Whatever, fine, whatever. She had the lump. Okay.
She had the lump.
Okay.
There is so much to unpack in just this audio alone that we're going to do more thoroughly later on in this series. But basically, they're talking about Stephanie's breast lump. Robbie is trying to claim that Stephanie's nipples started bleeding a year before Stephanie discovered her breast lump in 2017, and instead during a time that Stephanie stayed nights with Ashley in LA in 2016, which doesn't even make sense and is provably wrong. As we unpacked in a previous episode, one of Stephanie's nipples, not both, started bleeding on October 15th of 2017. It's documented in text messages. It happened 6 months after Stephanie discovered her breast lump. 6 months after Anthony and his wife immediately told Stephanie to get her lump assessed by her physician. 6 months after Stephanie had been telling the both of them that she was under the care of a doctor for her breast lump, but in fact was not. Robbie said this, though, because Ashley's original false story about Stephanie included reference to that short time in 2016. Ashley's told so many fake stories about Stephanie that he's getting them confused and has no idea what he's talking about. That's why he's saying, ask Ash, I hope you talk to Ash. Taylor tries to correct Robbie and says, no. Stephanie's nipples didn't start bleeding until after she had the lump, a year after the timeline you're talking about. She was in Pennsylvania, not LA, which is true. But then Taylor added in a huge falsity that comes directly and exactly from Ashley's original false story about Stephanie. That is a lie that we've addressed and that we're going to debunk even further in this series. Robbie gets palpably upset that he was challenged by Taylor when he was literally wrong about one of the most basic facts of the timeline, and then they both just resort to, I don't know, ask Ash. They're also both saying nipples, as in plural, just like Ashley did in her original false story, when really it was only one nipple that bled. Even the article accurately described it as only being one nipple. Taylor and Robbie are both wrong. Very wrong. They're both referencing Ashley's story. They're both confused. They're deferring to Ashley, and Ashley is more wrong than any of them. This is why Ashley's original false story about Stephanie from 2020 still matters greatly. It is what all of these people have clearly been brainwashed with all these years. And it is what they're still going off of to this day. In these upcoming episodes, you're going to see that they've had to manipulate and mold, cherry-picked and otherwise altered messages to fit what they could try to piece together from Ashley's original false storyline, while they've hidden all of the evidence that proves her and them wrong. Somehow, Ashley has been positioned by this group as the leader and the ultimate authority on Stephanie. As will become extensively clear in these episodes, Ashley is far from a valid authority on Stephanie or really much else for that matter. Another individual with a health business involved with this group is a woman named Gretchen Manzer. Gretchen is the one who you heard saying that there were statements she had made to the journalist that she didn't fully stand behind 100%. Gretchen is also the one who you heard commenting on how strange it was that what suddenly turned Robbie against Anthony years and years after Stephanie passed away was when he suddenly watched the documentary that Ashley's husband was the cinematographer for, which was about a fugitive and an ex-con who committed actual crimes and had nothing to do with Anthony.
It was funny when Robbie had the realization after watching that. We're like, welcome, Robbie. Where have you been? Right. But yeah, it's so weird how for him it just
is like the click of a finger, you know. Did you watch that documentary?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. But I heard that like Sarma feels really misrepresented. Like she doesn't feel like that was how she wanted her story to be told.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's so funny how he watched that and then like it just all clicked into place.
As you just heard, again, this was a documentary they expressed using as a model for what they wanted to do to Anthony. And Gretchen says here that the very documentary they revered as a model is one that a main subject feels really misrepresented by. As Gretchen was telling me her version of the Stephanie story, she admitted that it was hard for her to keep all of the facts and timelines straight.
And it just took me so long. And sorry, the story's it's just so many layers and components and timelines, and it's hard to get it all straight.
During my calls with this group that Robbie organized and prompted me to engage in, by the way, not the other way around, Robbie was so boastful about this plot and what he had done that he was just spewing information and divulging details to me left and right. Completely unprovoked, one of the details he divulged was a ranked list he spouted off of who in the group was most responsible for the Vanity Fair hit piece.
I will definitely take responsibility for I've been one of the people that's been pushing for this. If you want to take the list of people of why this article's coming out and why it's coming out in a mainstream publication is number one. Ash is the number one responsible. I would be number two. Tony would be number three, and Megan would be number four. It was us four who decided this needs to happen.
As you just heard, Robbie named Tony as the number 3 person responsible for the plot. Tony is Stephanie's brother. Tony has admitted that he's in charge of Stephanie's phone, and he's therefore responsible for all of the content that has been manipulated, twisted, hidden, and otherwise distorted to try to frame Anthony and coordinate with Ashley's original false story. For example, you're going to learn in this series that Dan Adler, the journalist, spent an entire year writing about Stephanie based on what was said and provided to him by Tony and the other plotters. Yet Dan did not know that Anthony and his wife had texted Stephanie and said that she should always see a physician for her breast lump right away, the very next day, right after Stephanie first discovered her lump in March of 2017. Dan remains completely unaware of this critical text message that in and of itself disproved the narrative the plotter sold him on all throughout his writing process, as was reflected in Dan's initial questions to Anthony. There is documented evidence that Dan was entirely unaware of this critical text message, as well as a lot of other critical evidence that should have been on Stephanie's phone for a whole year, all the way up until Dan first reached out to Anthony about the article, and Anthony had to be the one to inform him. But Dan didn't reach out for Anthony's side until right before Dan was planning on publishing his hit piece and had already formed the story. Anthony had to be the one to inform Dan that he had the entire narrative wrong and was missing critical evidence, but only had the opportunity to do so in response to Dan sending Anthony hundreds and hundreds of clearly biased questions with a deadline of 5 days to respond to, after Dan had already invested a year of his time into the other side and their false story.
There's a good chance that most likely Dan would have dropped the article if he knew earlier on that the day after Stephanie found the breast lump, that my wife and I told Stephanie that she should always see a physician. If Dan knew this, it would have been a shocker, because he was also told the same old Ashley lie, which was that I never told Steph to see a doctor. But Dan was too deep into the article. Too much time and money had been invested. And Dan was buried in Ashley Foster's falsities and lies. And everybody had to save face and just put an article out.
And that doesn't even scratch the surface of what Tony is culpable for hiding and distorting in efforts to rewrite history, portray a narrative that doesn't exist in reality, and frame Anthony to get a documentary deal. all of which is going to be thoroughly exposed in this series. Tony is the one you heard Robbie insulting and describing as being low conscious.
Tony might be tough because he's not as conscious. I wouldn't say he's as an evolved soul as we are.
Robbie also described Tony as not being level-headed.
Tony could be a little bit more on the edge. He might not be so level-headed, but everybody else I would say is level-headed.
If the plotters are saying that Tony is not level-headed, that's really saying something. Next up is a woman named Megan Elizabeth, who Robbie identified as being the number 4 person most responsible for this plot. Megan outed Tony for having multiple fake accounts that he uses to stalk and spy on the medical medium community.
It's interesting to see how his inner circle handles it too. Like, I'm not always paying attention to that stuff, but Tony has like other profiles that he's in these groups and he watches what they're saying.
We have since observed this group using fake accounts to try to influence public opinion, spread lies across the internet, and make it look like they have more support than they actually do. This is far from the behavior of honest people with an honest story to tell. Megan also outed Tony for constantly watching Anthony and wanting to take Anthony down.
I mean, Tony's like, he's been relentless about this, like, since Steph passed, like, just, we have to do something about this. And he's constantly watching Anthony and just grabbing every little bit of information that he thinks could be helpful to take him down.
And Megan is also the one you heard in previous episodes saying we need to get this guy off the internet and just take it all down.
Holy shit, we need to get this guy off the internet. Like, we need to just take it all down.
Megan has been working with Tony on this for a long time, trying to use cherry-picked contents on a deceased person's phone who's no longer here to speak for herself, so that they can craft false storylines that frame Anthony. When we spoke last year, Megan claimed to have seen everything on Stephanie's phone.
I've listened to her entire phone. I've listened to all their voice messages back and forth.
Yet, when Megan described her version of the Stephanie story to me, I really listened with an open mind and wanted to understand where she was coming from, but it quickly became abundantly clear that Megan, just like the rest of this hateful group, had no idea what she was talking about. She was wishy-washy and confused about every detail, and she even got the most basic key facts of the story wrong.
I can't remember if it was skin stuff or what it was, but yeah. I don't know that she really ever went to see a doctor once she started working with Anthony. I can't remember if he recommended the chiropractor or if she suggested it and then it never turned down or something. I'm trying to remember. I think, so when it was just a back injury, I'm trying to remember if there was like any push for a doctor at that point. I can't remember if it was the same. Can't remember the other people. Okay, so I can't remember this woman's name. But I don't remember exactly what it was. Definitely Taylor all the time. I don't know how much she was keeping up with Robbie at the time. Taylor, like, I don't know if she flew out there right away or what happened, but I didn't know what that name, recognize the name. And I don't know if Steph was on that call. I don't know if she was saying Anthony's saying it's not true or if she was saying it's not true. As you're going through the timeline of everyone's story, there's so much happening and it's hard to keep track of what happened when.
There is so much wrong with all of this too. It's ridiculous. Stephanie was not working with Anthony as a client, first of all. The most concerning thing here is Megan saying that she doesn't know if Stephanie saw a doctor, when there is evidence all over Stephanie's text threads demonstrating that while Stephanie made the decision to avoid seeing a doctor for her breast lump, even after Anthony and his wife repeatedly encouraged her to do so, Stephanie was seeing multiple doctors for her back injury and other concurrent health problems. It's one of the most key facts of the entire story. For somebody who said that they've seen everything on Stephanie's phone, that level of ignorance is highly problematic. As a reminder, my recorded call with Megan and my recorded calls with the other sources for the article took place after the article had already been written and right before it was published. At that stage, the article was already done, and they still couldn't get anything right. They got every key fact so painfully and provably wrong. Megan, like Gretchen, at least admitted that she was confused and that all of the different text threads and timelines were hard for her to keep track of. How dare you be that uncertain on what happened with Stephanie, yet so sure that all the work that Anthony has done to help and support the chronically ill for decades should be taken down? How dare you take a story that you're that uncertain about and text messages that you admittedly don't even understand or have organized to a media company to smear someone? A story that they admittedly had to hammer into the head of the journalist because even he was having a hard time wrapping his head around a lot of it, as Robbie said. A story that they had to biasedly shape by pointing him here and pointing him there, and that they had to threaten him to get him to publish. Megan was right about one thing, though. There is a lot going on with all of Stephanie's text threads that document what was happening. And that is why we're going to be here for a long time, unpacking it all, factually, and all of the other data that we have. Tony has had access to Stephanie's phone since before she passed away in 2018, and now for nearly 6 years since. Megan has been a part of this with Tony and has had access to the phone, again, for a long, long time. There is no excuse for any of the plotters being as ignorant as they are still to this day to the facts and the evidence. We've now spent the past year doing the homework that this group was not willing to do to get it right. It's so quick and easy to hurl out lies and misinformation, to cherry pick and misappropriate text messages, and to say what you feel like about somebody, whereas it takes a lot of time and energy to be factually correct, to get it right, and to prove this unbelievably deluded, hateful group wrong with evidence. But we are going to do it time and time again, as often as we need to. Of course, when people pass away, sometimes there are loved ones who have a hard time accepting what really happened and want to find someone to blame. In fact, there's a documented record of one of the plotters admitting in years past that they believed this whole thing to stem from Tony looking for someone to blame. But there's no excuse for manipulating and hiding evidence to try to rewrite history, frame someone, and smear them online and in the media. And none of this would have played out this way or have been taken this far if it weren't for Ashley and Robbie.
So let me send it to you. And to be honest, again, 100% transparent. Ash and I, in being the two people that taught, like Tony and Megan have no idea what the fuck they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. The whole podcast thing was dumb, so dumb. We had to kind of like educate them and convince them, hey, this is a better route to go. Mm-hmm. And this text there with us four is kind of funny back in the day. But anyways, the intention that Ash and I had is that it's going a Netflix series like Bad Vegan will be made about Anthony Miller. And it will be a fucking hit because what he pulled off is unbelievable. I mean, and the celebrity angle, like this Netflix version is going to go bonkers. It's going to take many, many years to get there. I mean, to produce something like that takes years, but it'll still be just like the Bad Vegan thing. Like, how many years ago did that whole thing actually happen versus like when the movie came out or the Netflix thing came out? Like, it's going to happen.
Holy shit. There's going to be a documentary about it all?
That's our vision. I mean, it's not going to be first you have to publish the article, and then once the article is published, then people start bidding on the piece. So just so you know, again, I guess I'm not even sure what it's not. The Hillsong article I just sent you
is
being made into a documentary.
Okay.
So Dan Adler and the whole Vanity Fair people, they have a history of producing something that is, well done, done well enough to be turned into a documentary of some sort.
Holy shit.
And he's going to look real bad, Amber. It's going to look real bad.
This is what they tried to recruit me with. The promise of a big Netflix documentary deal. These main plotters have recruited others to join them over the years, and there are other individuals involved that will be exposed throughout this series. And then we have Dan Adler, who really should be called a plotter too at this point because we have so much evidence that we're going to release of just how deeply he was in cahoots with this group. Dan is the writer at Vanity Fair that the plotter specifically sought out to do this hit piece with the premeditated goal from day one of it ultimately leading to a documentary deal for them. On June 1st of last year, a couple weeks after the article and our podcast episodes came out, Dan Adler did a very unusual, very brief 21-minute interview as a guest on a small podcast that sole focus is criticizing and disparaging people in the health and wellness industry, further proving Dan's bias. Shockingly, again, after the article was published, Dan admitted in this interview that he was confused about everything he had written about regarding Anthony.
But I think one thing that also came across in the text messages that I reported on and in many of the conversations I had with sources is that a lot of it is just very confusing. There's a lot of information being conveyed. There's a lot of jargon being used. There are lots of supplements talking to sources about their interpretation of the information. More than anything else, I think there's just a lot of confusion. There's a lot of the sense of, if I could just understand what's being conveyed through this figure who's portraying himself as I say in the story, just under God, if I could just understand what the message is, that would help me. But when you try to look at what the message is, it's very, very murky.
That is something.
From a journalist.
From a journalist, exactly. Mm-hmm. From the journalist that had already written the piece. He's confused about everything. And first I have to address what Dan said in here about how he wrote in his hit piece that Anthony portrays himself to be just under God. Anthony has absolutely never said that he is just under God, and he does not portray himself in that way. That is an Ashley Foster talking point that she has been misappropriating and mischaracterizing Anthony with for years to serve her own agenda. Clearly, that must have been one of the many things that Ashley and Robbie had to give Dan direction on and hammer into his head, as that is not something that Anthony has ever said or published, not once. Apparently, Dan didn't properly research or fact-check his work and just adopted provably false narratives from this group. Secondly, he said that what he was reporting on was just very confusing, and he thinks there's just a lot of confusion. Yeah, Dan, your sources were confused, and that's why it was confusing to you too. And they were confused because they didn't know the story of what really happened, and because Ashley Foster has been lying about it so much since day one. And if what was being presented to Dan seemed that murky and was really all that confusing, why on earth would he go through with publishing an article on a story that he was that unclear on? Or at least, why on earth spend a whole year writing a story you're uncertain about and then only reach out to Anthony after it's already been formed? I would imagine that to be because Dan, like many journalists these days, was not really interested in the truth. So you've got this crazy, toxic, and unprecedented combination of a brother who's looking for someone to blame, sources who don't even know what happened, admittedly can't keep track of the timeline, and don't have their facts straight. You've got a journalist who's admittedly confused and still to this day doesn't even understand the subject matter he wrote about. Sources and a journalist that are all relying on Ashley Foster as the ultimate authority on Stephanie, when Ashley, as you'll learn in this series, was not around for what happened with Stephanie at all. Admittedly barely even spoke to Stephanie during the time period that this is all about in 2017, has been caught flat out lying about Stephanie, And the original conjured up story Ashley posted that they're all still running with to this day had dozens of verifiable falsities in it, including the one you heard Robbie and Taylor repeat. And that's why Ashley scrubbed it from the internet when she got a legal letter in 2020. You've got a journalist who was somehow conveniently unaware of the text messages that were on Stephanie's phone that disproved the entire narrative he was sold on for the whole year he spent writing his story. You've got sources that expressly want to take Anthony down, have a vested interest in being part of getting a Netflix documentary deal, sources that also have other documented ulterior motives that are going to be uncovered for the first time in these episodes, a journalist that has a vested interest in securing a big Netflix documentary deal using his story, sources who admitted to shaping the article themselves by giving the journalist a lot of direction for the piece, having to hammer their narrative into his head, point him here and point him there, and threaten him to get him to publish it. If there were ever a perfect recipe for corruption and dishonesty, this would be it. Again, this is one of the biggest scandals that has ever happened in the health industry. This group has been using, abusing, and exploiting Stephanie's name and legacy as a means to an end. This was certainly never about the truth for them. If you're confused, you do not get to fill in the gaps as you want to. If you can't get the facts or the timeline straight, you're not in a valid position to tell a story, let alone to take it to a media company. If you're unaware of even the most basic key facts of what really happened, you have absolutely no business perpetuating a story that you don't understand. They tried to get away with lying and getting it wrong using Anthony's name. They tried to get away with lying and getting it wrong using Stephanie's name to serve their own agenda because she's not here to speak for herself. They tried to get away with grossly misrepresenting medical medium and the community to serve their own agenda. And none of it is going to stand. Lies, inaccurate information, plotting, and scheming will only ever get you so far. And the full, actual truth is coming out in this series. So Dan, the journalist, published his hit piece. We came out with our first few podcast episodes that began the process of exposing the corruption and collusion that took place between the media company and the plotters. And we began to expose the plotters' ulterior motives. Their goal from the beginning was not to simply put their version of a story out there that they believed to be true. Their goal was categorically to take medical medium and the community down.
The response to the podcasts was massive. And I just want to issue a huge thank you to everyone for all of the support we have received through all of the craziness. So many people were devastated by the fact that the plotters could be so intentionally poisonous, to go so low as to use a manipulated story of a deceased woman to try to injure a community of people who were just trying to heal. I read through many comments from people who were shocked and outraged by the voices they recognized as being behind this. The fact that something so dark is coming from people who portray themselves to be very different.
There were also a lot of people who came forward to share their own experiences with the plotters. One of them is a woman named Melody Pence, who has been applying medical medium information for several years and knew some of the plotters personally. Following the release of our first ever podcast about this group, Melody took to her Instagram stories to share about attempts that were made to recruit her, including even before Ashley came out with her original false story in 2020.
So when I listened to the podcast, I could not believe what I was hearing, as you guys could not believe what you were hearing either. And what I recognized right away was Robbie Barbero's voice. So clear. I mean, it's a voice that if you know him, if you talk to him, if you've been around him, you're going to pick up on his voice. It's a very distinctive voice. And what I knew Robbie as is someone who is very charismatic on the outside, seemed like a pure, genuine soul to me. I looked up to him. I thought he was an amazing person. And so when I heard him talking like that on the medical medium podcast that Anthony just released, I saw his true colors, and it was shocking. It was shocking to realize that someone that you thought was a good person and had so much charisma on the outside and portrayed that they wanted to help others is not like that. Honestly, it was so shocking that it took me like a full day to like recover from that. And what's interesting about Robbie is he comes off as such a positive vibe and wanting to help people. Well, something that I brought up in my last stories was when I met Robbie in, 2016. I'm not sure when. It was when Anthony did his event in LA. And I was there. I got interviewed by Robbie, and I remember he told me at one point, he said, just focus on the food. And it's like, when he said that, I felt a lack of compassion because he had just interviewed me about my story, the struggles I'd been through. I had a lot of failures, a lot of heartbreak, and then to hear just focus on the food. To just focus on the food for my Instagram, right? That I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he was saying. Like he didn't want to hear about like someone's struggles or pain exactly. It was just like, yeah, focus on the food, which is crazy because that's not even what the chronically ill is about. And he does help chronically ill people. He helps people with diabetes, and so right there is just a red flag of lacking compassion. And also, speaking of this elite group, right, and being recruited that they talk about in the video, my nose is just so bad right now. But I remember, when shortly after he moved to Miami in 2020, when COVID happened, I all of a sudden noticed that he was watching my stories, and I was like, why? Like, that's weird. Like, we follow each other, but he never communicates with me. I don't communicate with him. And then all of a sudden one day he was just watching my stories a lot. Then I get a DM from him, completely unexpected, and it basically is inviting me to go to Miami and stay at his house, that he has a guest bedroom, blah, 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 this and that. And I was just like, that's weird. And in my gut feeling at that time, I was like, well, this isn't a romantic interest. Like, what does he want? You know what I mean? And now, looking back, it all makes sense. It all makes sense that they were recruiting people. Someone DM'd me yesterday and said that they did his program and they've been around him before, and that he always has females coming in and out of his house. He's always surrounded by females, and that's odd, right? Thank God I didn't go. And but now I realize it could have been because he was trying to recruit me and turn me against MM, which would never happen. So I found out about Ashley Foster through, I knew that things were getting weird with this group, and I'm about to go into this, Ashley's group. And like a couple years ago, in 2018, when I moved back to Hawaii, Gretchen lived there. She invited me over. I don't think I realized before I went to her house how against MM she was. I was just going there to meet a familiar face, because Gretchen was a part of Reclaimers of Health in 2016, 17. So I still thought maybe she's still doing MM, whatever. So anyways, I go to her house and she talks to me about how bad Anthony is, how bad MM is, and basically trying to turn me against MM. Well, I never saw her again after that. We lived on the same island. I never contacted her, nothing. It was just such a turnoff to me. And the other thing that she was talking about was Ashley, and basically referring to Ashley as if she's some type of idol, some type of god, because Gretchen worshipped her. I mean, she did. Sorry, Gretchen, if you're seeing this, but you did. And everything Ashley did was amazing. And Ashley was the one that had a heavy influence on Gretchen and made Gretchen really not like MM so much. So what does that say? And here now we're seeing her resurface. And a couple years ago, Ashley's Instagram got shut down because she was blaming Anthony for her friend's death, verbally announcing it on Instagram and everything. And now she is. And what's crazy is Ashley was at the MM event in LA, the same place I met Robbie. I knew they were good friends because they just stuck to each other and hung out together the entire time. Ashley's husband was doing the video for interviewing people. He was the cameraman when Robbie interviewed me, okay? And so this is just comes full circle, you know what I mean? Oh, my blood's starting to boil. So anyways, also real quick in the podcast, they talk about how they have someone that can do the video. Well, guess who do you think that is? I mean, I'm just speaking from my own intuition here, but come on, like, I'm sure it's her husband recording for the documentary. I don't know, but that's the thing. And I remember when I saw Ashley, I was excited to meet her because she had a lot of what seemed like light about her. She was smiley, happy, just seemed so like nice. But then what I realized is when I met her, she like really didn't hardly even say hi to me, anything. I mean, and then I realized she's like that with her friends. She's like that with her friends. Because I was like, oh, I thought she was so nice. Like, okay. And then I just see her with her circle of friends. And I was like, And that was my first impression. But she will play the victim card very well. Very well. So don't get fooled. Who knows who the 3 younger recruits are? So who knows? But I wanted to share everything with y'all, and I'm not done yet, but I wanted to share everything with y'all so you could gather the information too and just see like, okay, what's going on here, you know? And during that time is just when I started realizing there was a whole bunch of group of people against MM, simply because who knows why they're not happy. So Robbie's on the podcast, and then of course raw Christina, she says the parting of the Red Seas. That is disgusting. That is disgusting. She is someone who preaches spiritualism, who preaches peace and love and happiness and healing and health. And then she's behind this, directly orchestrating how she's going to take down MM. Are you kidding me? And the reason I know this is because if you have followed her, if you have watched many of her YouTube videos, if you are a follower of her trying to heal, then you will recognize her voice when you listen closely. So baffling to me is these people, right, that have high following numbers, who's supposed to be what they come off as to help people get healthy and well. They want to wipe out the chronically ill community. So you want to wipe out people that you are actually in vegetables and people getting their health back. You don't really care if you're... I've also gotten so many messages from you guys, and some of you guys have said Taylor is in the video, the one that says, oh, I have to do really, really bad things to get here. That's 3 people. Robbie, Christina, 5, and either Taylor, Brittany, or someone else. And again, this is just from what I've seen in my personal experience, who I've talked to personally. How it evolved for me was through Gretchen. And yeah, since then it's just, I've had a huge awareness about people trying to take down MM because of what's happened. So I hope this clears things up, and I'm super tired because I have so much brain fog, but let me know. Okay. You guys want to know like what else I think is so sinister about this? People that are called, first of all, they call themselves elite. So what does that tell you? You know what I mean? The only person that is elite to me is God, and Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. And That is a huge red flag, number one, that they're calling themselves elite. That should be enough. That's enough for me right there. And then the thing is that they're saying, oh, you have to do bad things to get into this group. And then she's talking to Amber, oh, but you didn't have to do anything and you're here, ha ha ha. And it's like, what does that sound like? Yeah, that sounds like a cult to me. That sounds like something that you have to be a part of that's elite, that you have to do bad things to join. And it sounds very, very dark to me. What about you? You guys, honestly, what that made me think of once I got over the shock of, I'm still in shock of who's involved, honestly, but it's just so crystal clear that, now I know who these people are. So the shock is lifting.
And then a couple days later, after our second episode came out, Melody posted this.
But I've been online and seen some people just really talking crap about medical medium, and it's just really not cool. It's really not cool. It's like, I'm going to be straight up. And because I'm exhausted and I'm just a person that doesn't have really a lot of filter these days because I am working my ass off and I'm fried. So here I go. But, people that want to talk shit and talk bad about somebody who's doing something amazing have nothing going on in their lives. There's a lack of faith on this planet that is so massive and so many people have trauma and things that have happened to them that they want to blame someone for. Instead of looking within and fixing their own life, they have to try to bring someone else down.
Later on in this series, more is going to be shared about Melody's experiences, which very much align with my own experiences with this group. As the content and evidence from all the upcoming episodes unfolds, you're going to see just how spot on Melody is, especially about the dynamic of this group, how they worship and idolize Ashley Foster, and the influence that Ashley specifically has had upon them turning against medical medium over the years.
And the other thing that she was talking about was Ashley, and basically referring to Ashley as if she's some type of idol, some type of god, because Gretchen worshipped her. I mean, she did. Sorry, Gretchen, if you're seeing this, but you did. And everything Ashley did was amazing. And Ashley was the one that had a heavy influence on Gretchen and made Gretchen really not like MM so much.
You're going to see that Ashley has been lying and plotting and scheming for years for ulterior reasons while pretending to be a whistleblower. Ashley so badly wanted to position herself as a leader and a guru and get attention for that under the guise of being an advocate. On top of the lies and falsities she's already been caught telling, as well as the many more lies and falsities of hers that are going to be exposed in these episodes. One of the biggest giveaways that Ashley is completely disingenuous is the fact that she has now spent the entire past year relentlessly belittling, harassing, body shaming, name calling, and attacking the very people she claims to be advocating for, the chronically ill. Ashley got sloppy and put her true character and intentions on public display, which is purely to cause harm to Anthony and the medical medium community, and there is no low that she won't stoop to in her efforts. Any journalist or media company that takes Ashley Foster and her organized hateful group seriously is a joke and a sham. Anyone who platforms a group that is lying, spewing hatred, burning books, and calling for another human being to be exterminated by fire is despicable. And Melody wasn't the only one with a story to share. A lot of people have come forward with all kinds of information and evidence which will be discussed throughout these upcoming episodes. Last year, following the release of the previous podcast episodes, there was also something really suspicious that occurred. Immediately after the episodes were released, my computer, which of course had the recordings on it, was hacked. I have never in my life had anything like that happen prior. But all of a sudden, right after our podcast started coming out, one night I was sitting at my desk about a foot away from the computer, using my phone while my desktop computer screen was idle. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that something had taken over my computer and a bunch of my files were being pulled up at lightning speed. I realized that somebody had hacked into my computer and was looking through my files extremely rapidly. My gut reaction was to just shut down and unplug the computer immediately. And thankfully, I learned later that that's exactly what you're supposed to do in that situation, as it removes a hacker's access. I was able to catch and interrupt the attempt right away. Now, hacking into someone's computer is obviously not only a privacy violation, but it's also massively illegal. And it says everything about the character and the desperation of the person who did it or had someone do it for them. I had to get a new computer, and I had to replace other devices like my phone that were compromised by the hacked Wi-Fi. And I had to move because I no longer felt comfortable living where I was living. I consulted with some experts and I was told that you have to know someone's location in order to hack them like that. So it easily could have happened again. Can't say for sure who did it yet, but one of the plotters knew where I lived. I've had specialists investigating this situation and supporting me with security on my new devices. It seems to me like someone wanted those recordings really badly.
The recordings serve as critical evidence of the identity of the plotters because their whole plan was to go through with this anonymously and conceal their identities so that they couldn't be held accountable for the false information they were using the media to spread. They serve as critical evidence of the plotters' own ranking system of the top people who are most responsible for the plot. And the recordings serve as critical evidence of the malicious intentions behind the plotters, the verifiably false information that they've tried to use to recruit people, the recruitment tactics, the verifiably false information they fed to the media, as well as a very serious corruption and collusion between the plotters and the media company that they sold false stories to. And there's so much more from the recordings that we are going to be releasing.
Yes, and as such, Ashley and the other plotters did everything that they could to try to discredit the recordings and the podcast episodes, but it's really hard to walk yourself out of what you said in your own words. After the podcast came out, Ashley started behaving very erratically. She kept frantically changing her profile over and over again. She called Anthony and I both obnoxious names. She kept posting and deleting things. She issued a statement that she was, quote, proud to be a plotter, and then she deleted it. Ashley then continued on with her pattern of simply pivoting when proven wrong. She started spreading new versions of false stories about Stephanie, and other plotters followed suit. They combined their pivoted, new, and updated false narratives about Stephanie with other types of false information about Medical Medium and the community. Absolutely anything they could piece together and fabricate to try to disparage Medical Medium. Robbie and Christina were both reportedly caught deleting comments and blocking anyone who recognized their voices and asked them about their involvement with this plot to take Anthony and the community down. Numerous other individuals have been caught lying about their involvement, which is going to be exposed. Ashley even tried to gaslight people by claiming that things everyone heard the plotters say very clearly that can't mean anything else in any other context were not said. And then, a couple months after the attempt to hack into my computer was unsuccessful, another suspicious event occurred. Some of you may have noticed that our previous 4 podcast episodes came down from Apple in the fall of last year. Ashley Foster instantly started spreading rumors that they were taken down because they contained illegal recordings. This became her favorite deflection tactic and false claim. Once, Ashley posted a screenshot of a message she had gotten that says, "The plot thickens. The plotter podcasts from this year are gone. Not sure if you knew that." And Ashley replied,
"I did, yes. they were removed by Apple because they contained illegal recordings.
This is not true. And I'm happy to report that the podcast episodes became available again on Apple in January of this year, ironically shortly after Ashley posted this falsity. It's important for everyone to know what really happened.
A law firm whose client was kept anonymous filed a strange, vague claim with Apple demanding the podcast be taken down. Apple sent my team an email just to alert us of the claim and to give us the ability to dispute it. Unfortunately, this email somehow went to spam, so my team did not see it in time. We found out later that Apple has a policy that they only give you 5 days to respond. Otherwise, they just automatically remove the content by default. Because my team didn't see the email, that is what happened. They were removed by default after 5 days had passed. But this whole time, they've always remained up on every other platform because nothing was actually wrong with the episodes. It was just a fluke that the email alert went to spam, so we couldn't dispute it in time. Anybody can file a claim, even if it's unfounded and inaccurate, and if my team would have seen the email, we would have been able to provide evidence to refute the claim immediately. We were very upset when we realized that the podcast episodes were unjustly removed from Apple due to a mere fluke. Apple told us we needed to first try and deal with the law firm that requested the podcast to be taken down, but that law firm refused to engage with us and ignored our outreach. We informed Apple, and then Apple ended up investigating the claim. After this thorough investigation, Apple concluded that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the podcast episodes and that the recordings are in fact legal. The episodes were restored to Apple in January, and they all still remain up on every other platform.
As I've said all along, the recordings were legally obtained. And that has now been confirmed by Apple itself in its restoration of our episodes. Once again, Ashley Foster is wrong and her claims are false. Even Apple itself has now proved Ashley wrong. Anthony posted about this ridiculous ordeal in January, and one commenter said, so who was the anonymous person this law firm acted on behalf of? That's what I want to know. But there are not many options, are there? Kinda obvious who would go to such lengths to get it taken down. It seems as though the claim that was filed with Apple was another attempt to suppress our ability to defend the truth and disprove the attacks and the false narrative this organized, hateful group is responsible for. But such attempts are not going to stand. We are going to continue unraveling their contrived stories, lies, tactics, disinformation, and more. The behavior this organized, hateful group has exhibited, which we've only just scratched the surface of in this episode, is beyond scandalous. I've never experienced such little regard for the truth in my life from any individual, let alone a coordinated group of people, or such little regard for how one's behavior impacts other people. Unfortunately, Ashley Foster and her hateful group have caused very real harm to many people's real lives in their pursuit of a documentary deal and all of the benefits that would come along with that for them at all costs. And their willingness to just say anything to get a rise out of people using Anthony's name. It matters greatly to bring attention to this. It matters greatly for everyone to know what's really going on here. There are many episodes to come, and they're not going to be able to stop us from defending the truth.
Some of you may be unaware that this has even been happening, but many of you have been tremendously injured and harmed by what this organized hateful group has done. The record needs to be set straight, and they need to be called out for what they've done and are still doing. The medical medium community does not deserve to be attacked like this, and we are going to set the record straight as many times as we need to. We invite you to have an open mind, listen to the facts, learn how they manipulated and altered data and created falsities and lies. It's a story for the history books that is truly unprecedented. If you have been harmed, deterred from your healing process, bullied, shamed, emotionally upset, or physically hurt by flare-ups of your conditions, from the stress induced by the plotters' attacks, like hundreds of others have been reported, please go to medicalmedium.com/safe space to submit your report and share your story. If you've been contacted by anyone who's tried to deter you from using Medical Medium information, please take screenshots and screen recordings and submit them to the same place, medicalmedium.com/safe space.